Tonight we journey to 17th century Holland. Fog clings to the harbor, wooden ships creak on dark water, and candlelit windows flicker in tight little rows. Somewhere behind one of those leaded glass panes, you step into the chilly studio of a Dutch painter, where the smell of turpentine and smoke mingles with the musty scent of old linen canvases. There's no music, just the scratch of quills, the occasional grunt of a model shifting her pose, and the gentle mutter of men who haven't left their brushes in days. Still life dominates the easel, cheese wheels, pewter goblets, half-peeled lemons, but soon, something stranger will appear. A fruit so foreign, so absurdly curved, it'll baffle everyone in this town. And no, you probably won't survive this century unless you own a wool cloak, trust bleeding as a cure, and really like salted herring. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world we drift off together. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift in the painter's cold studio, watching him paint another half-eaten pomegranate, when you hear the muffled clatter of hooves outside. Couriers yelling. Bells ringing. Someone shouts, "They've dock." East Indies vessel. That's not just news, it's a spark. In a country where trade fuels everything from city planning to dinner conversation, a ship's return means treasure. And treasure doesn't just mean gold. It means spice. It means feathers. It means, occasionally, the ridiculous. You step into the street and follow the crowd toward the docks, your wooden clogs clacking over cobblestones. The air smells like fish and firewood, mixed with something sweet you can't place. That's when you see it, crates of dried leaves, a silver monkey in a cage, and then a bunch of yellow fruit. Bent, like crescent moons. The dockworkers laugh. One bites it, grimaces, and throws it to a goat. From the east, says a sailor, shrugging. They eat 'em raw, like candy. Except, here's the thing, nobody here eats them raw. Not yet. You're staring at the first bananas ever to arrive in the Dutch Republic. And no one, not the wealthy merchant leaning on his cane, not the scholar scribbling in his notebook, and certainly not the artist waiting nearby with a sketchpad, has a clue what they're actually supposed to taste like. But they know one thing. This odd fruit looks beautiful. And that's enough. In the chilly studio that evening, the painter eyes the banana with suspicion. It's already browning at the edges. Not ideal. Still, he props it carefully between a fig and a broken clay pot. You watch him squint, dab his brush in ochre, and start painting. He's not sure whether to give the peel a shimmer like a lemon or a flat matte like a pepper. He goes somewhere in between. Artistic liberty. You're part of this moment now, an invisible observer in a world on the edge of discovery. The painter is part of a growing obsession, exotica, the new class of imported goods that lend mystery and wealth to Dutch still life. Lemurs, parrots, pineapples, imported textiles, and now bananas. They don't eat them. They pose them. Because in this era, food on a table isn't for snacking, it's a symbol. A rotting peach beside a silver spoon. Memento mori. A peeled orange with a knife. Vanitas. But a banana? Well, that's still up for interpretation. You lean back and notice something peculiar. The painter paints the banana slightly straighter than it is. Why? He's uncomfortable with the curve. Too odd. Too suggestive. He doesn't know yet that bananas don't come from one tree but from giant herbaceous plants. He certainly doesn't know they're clones, propagated without seeds. That knowledge won't enter Western botanical literature for decades. Right now, this banana might as well be a holy relic or an alien artifact. Outside the studio, the city of Amsterdam buzzes with this new import. Not just the fruit itself, but the idea of it. In an era obsessed with cataloging the world through maps, atlases, herbals, and cabinets of curiosity. Adding one more thing to the visual record is practically a civic duty. And so, artists paint bananas, even if they have no clue what they're doing. Here's your first mainstream historical fact for tonight. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, was the world's first megacorporation, and by the early 1600s, it controlled trade across much of Southeast Asia. They brought back nutmeg, cloves, textiles, and yes, sometimes bananas, though not consistently or in great quantity. Most didn't survive the trip. The ones that did, they ended up in private gardens, menageries, or art studios. But here's a fringe tidbit. Some early banana depictions were based not on real fruit but on carved ivory models. Yep. There are accounts of artisans carving tropical fruits in ivory to simulate rare goods for curious Europeans. The artists didn't know they were painting fakes. They just needed reference. And then comes the kicker. Historians still argue whether the first banana paintings were based on actual bananas or pure hearsay. Sketches brought from the colonies. Verbal descriptions. Curved, yellow, soft inside. That's not a lot to go on. And yet, the paintings appeared. Back in the studio, the painter finishes his work and steps back. The banana sits there, regal and unfamiliar. He doesn't taste it. He doesn't even touch it with his hands. By morning, it'll be black and useless. But preserved on canvas, it becomes eternal. You run a fingertip across the edge of the table where the fruit rests. It's waxy, real, but only for a moment. The painting, though, that lasts centuries. The banana doesn't last long. Not in the studio, and definitely not in the Amsterdam air. By the next morning, it's collapsed into a bruised, leaky mess oozing something that smells suspiciously like fermented apricots and candle wax. The painter sighs and tosses it out the back window where a grateful pig waits. You step back into the cobbled streets just as another East Indies ship is arriving. This one's bigger, grimmer, and noisier, rigging creaking, sailors yelling, and carts lining up before it even finishes docking. You follow the crowd again, because let's face it, 17th century Dutch life isn't exactly buzzing with newness unless a ship rolls in. And this one has stories. Among the barrels of tamarind and wax-sealed bundles of cinnamon is a cluster of bananas, some green, some yellow, all bruised and confused. They're wrapped in palm leaves and stored next to parrots in bamboo cages. No refrigeration. No real plan. They weren't even supposed to come here. They were afterthoughts. Banana stowaways. One sailor explains the cargo to a wealthy merchant in patchy Portuguese and even patchier Dutch. Bananas. Bananen. Plant of the islands. Children eat them. Good for stomach. He pats his belly with pride. The merchant looks down at the bruised fruit and squints. You say, edible? The sailor shrugs. Soft. Strange. That's all it takes. The merchant buys the bunch, drops it into a velvet-lined basket, and wheels it off to his townhouse as if he's just acquired a crown jewel. You trail behind. Inside the house, things are quiet, but rich. Heavy drapes. Silver-framed mirrors. Maps with dragons on them. A servant girl peeks at the bananas, pokes one, then immediately hides her hand in her apron, terrified she's bruised it. It's that exotic. That precious. The merchant invites a local artist, one of the fancier ones who charges triple if you want satin fabric or a half-peeled orange, and asks for a still life. No specific instructions. Just include those. And so, you find yourself watching again, as another painter stands before a fruit he's never tasted, held, or even seen illustrated. He walks around the bananas like he's studying a sleeping animal. Eventually, he sets up his canvas, starts sketching, and mutters to himself, golden crescent, waxy, no fuzz. Odd. You can tell he wants to touch it. Maybe just a gentle poke. But he resists. Because what if it bruises? What if it collapses? What if it's cursed? Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the 17th century, exotic items were signs of global dominance. Holland wasn't just a place of windmills and cheese wheels. It was a global empire in the making, with tentacles stretching into Africa, the Americas, and most importantly here, the East Indies. The VOC wasn't just trading goods. It was shaping taste. It brought the world home in crates, and bananas were one of the stranger gifts. And here's tonight's quirky fact. Bananas often arrived in Europe by accident. They weren't a targeted crop like cloves or nutmeg. They weren't profitable. Too delicate. Too short-lived. They were weird stuff that grows there. Even the colonial botanists often misclassified them. One early herbal called them miraculous beans that grow upside down. As the artist paints, he decides the banana looks a little too plain. So, he adds tiny dappled spots. Maybe he saw something similar on a fig once. Maybe his guessing. Doesn't matter. The patron won't notice. Or so he thinks. But here's where things get deliciously murky. Historians still argue whether the paintings that survive today, those lush, decadent still lifes with bananas nestled next to overripe peaches and gleaming silver pitchers, are based on actual observations or composite fantasies. Some claim artists copied each other's banana depictions without ever having seen the real fruit. Others say they sketched them from memory, or worse, from secondhand sailor gossip. Like banana folklore, frozen in oil. The painter's brush glides across the canvas, building up layers. You notice how he exaggerates the curve. Makes it elegant. Not absurd. Almost musical. Like a lyre. The background darkens, the bananas pop. No one will care that the peel texture is off. Or that the ends look more like squash tips. They just want the feeling of something foreign, rare, untouchable. At a nearby cafe later that night, a group of artists gather over tankards of thick ale. You sit quietly in the corner as they swap stories. Did you hear Van Kessel painted 2 bananas this week? Both from memory. I thought he used wax models. No, he said he saw them once, in Bruges. I heard they're poisonous if you eat the peel. They're shaped like, well, let's just say it's lucky the church doesn't look too closely. And the laughter rolls across the room like thunder on a distant coast. You glance at one of the sketchbooks on the table. Someone's doodled a banana, beside a pistol, beside a flaming skull. It's surreal, a little chaotic, and somehow very on brand for 17th century Dutch artists who spent too many hours painting grapes. What you're witnessing is not just artistic curiosity, it's cultural inflation. Bananas were never meant to mean so much. But in this moment, they do. They're tokens of trade, of mystery, of status. Their shape is unfamiliar, their taste unknown, and their perishability just makes them all the more sacred. Eventually, the artist finishes the commissioned still life. The bananas glow under a trick of light he invented himself, dappled candle sheen on yellow wax. The patron beams. He doesn't ask how the fruit tastes. He doesn't plan to find out. The bananas rot in a crystal bowl within days. The painting, however, hangs above the fireplace, next to a taxidermied parrot and a signed atlas of Sumatra. And you, lucky sleeper, get to follow their story further, deeper into the world of artists who painted fruit they feared to touch, for patrons who prized what they didn't understand. You drift from the merchant's house as the painting is lifted carefully onto the wall, the bananas now immortal in oils and shadow. Outside, the air is cold again, just the way Dutch painters like it. Cold keeps the food from spoiling. Cold makes the colors more vivid. Cold means fewer smells to distract the artist from his delicate work. You walk back through narrow alleys, past shuttered shops and icy canals, until you reach another studio, this one less grand. Fewer silver candlesticks, more rat traps. Here, the painter is younger. Not famous. Not yet. But he's hungry, both literally and artistically. And he's just seen a banana for the first time. Or so he claims. He didn't buy it. He couldn't afford one. He saw it while delivering a commission across town, something about a dead heron and a pile of oysters. The banana was sitting in a window. Yellow, curving, impossible to ignore. And now he has to paint it. So he does. You hover near his shoulder as he dips a cracked brush into a small puddle of ochre and starts dabbing at the canvas. No real banana in front of him. Just memory. Just instinct. That should be fine, right? He's painted lemons before, and figs, and even one suspiciously tropical fruit that might have been a lumpy mango. This can't be that different. But he pauses. Bananas don't reflect light the same way. They're matte and waxy, not glossy like citrus. And the tips, what do the ends look like? He tries a swirl, then wipes it off with a bit of old linen. Tries again. Still wrong. Eventually, he leans back and sighs. It's not real, he mutters. But it looks right. And that's enough. You see, this is the quiet truth of Dutch still life. It's less about realism than plausibility. It just has to feel true. To seem as if the viewer could reach out and touch the banana, even if the painter never has. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The 17th century Dutch Republic experienced what scholars call the Golden Age, a time of immense economic, artistic, and scientific advancement. Art flourished not just in royal courts, but in ordinary homes. Middle-class merchants became the new aristocracy, and they wanted their wealth recorded in paintings, often featuring food they'd never eat, in rooms they never sat in. And here's your quirky tidbit. Many still-life artists shared models, literal props. One painter might borrow a rotting fish or a bowl of cherries from another's studio. And when it came to bananas, these became something of a traveling myth. It looked like this, one artist would say, making a crude sketch. Another would copy that sketch, embellish it, and pass it on. By the end, the banana had grown fatter, smoother, glossier, more imagined than observed. And so, historians still argue whether certain iconic banana paintings even count as observation at all. Were they moments of first contact? Or collective hallucination? You trail behind the young painter as he takes his canvas to a local dealer. The shop smells of dust and varnish. A bell rings as he enters. Behind the counter is a fat man with a monocle and an eye for trend. He peers at the banana, tilts his head, and grins. Ah, tropical. Exotic. Very fashionable right now. He nods. Let's put it in the window. And just like that, the painting joins a wave, a quiet, growing trend sweeping the Dutch art world. Bananas are becoming the new peacock feather, the new silver goblet, the new way to whisper I've seen things you haven't. The painting doesn't last long in the window. It's snatched up within a day by a widow from The Hague who wants to remind herself of the world. She's never seen a banana. Probably never will. But the idea of one is enough. You stand beside her as she hangs it in her dining room, next to her prized painting of a split melon and a housefly. The banana adds an air of sophistication. It says, I know what's out there. I'm connected. Even if the curve is anatomically ridiculous and the scale is totally off. And while no one says it out loud, there's a secret in these paintings. Bananas are funny. They're shaped strangely. They sit awkwardly in bowls. They lean suggestively beside bottles of wine. Some artists lean into this. Others try to cover it up with artful lighting and distracting grapes. You head back out onto the street, where another painter, a rival of the young one, stands glaring at the shop window, fuming. He saw one once, and now he's an expert, he mutters. He goes home, sketches a banana from the vague shape he glimpsed, and adds it to his latest work, a towering pyramid of shellfish and citrus. The banana looks stiff, unripe, a little angry. He's not the only one guessing. Soon, you see banana shapes in tapestries, banana motifs carved into wooden moldings, banana doodles in the margins of botanical journals. And they're all slightly wrong. But everyone pretends they're right. Because to admit otherwise would be to shatter the illusion. And the Dutch, practical as they are, love an illusion that sells. As night falls and the city's canals reflect rows of amberlit windows, you pass by yet another studio, where a painter is finishing a commission for a guild. He's included not one, but 3 bananas stacked artfully on a silver tray, leaning just so, like ballerinas in mid-stretch. He leans back and murmurs, no idea what they taste like. Probably awful. You smile. He's probably right. It's mid-morning now. The light is crisp, bouncing off the canal in silvery shards as you wander deeper into the market district. Bakers are stacking bread into neat golden towers, butchers are hacking at meat behind thin veils of steam, and everywhere, absolutely everywhere, someone is talking about bananas. Not because they've eaten one. Because someone else painted one. You duck into a small print shop where 2 apprentices are hunched over an open sketchbook, noses nearly touching the page. Look at the shadow, one whispers. That's how you get the shape right. The drawing is delicate, curved just enough, with a little cross-hatching around the tip. It's not from life. It's copied from a painting, which may have been copied from a sketch, which may have been copied from someone's memory of seeing a banana for 10 seconds through a dockside crate. You leave the shop and make your way to the edge of the harbor, where a new batch of artists are sketching live cargo. They're mostly drawing parrots, monkeys, and bundles of ginger root. But one man, his hat tilted dramatically low, is trying to capture a banana that's already starting to rot in the sun. He squints, draws fast, and mutters, like a candle, but alive. You peek over his shoulder. His banana looks wrong. It's too sharp, the peel's too thick, and he's given it a little stem that looks like a tiny mushroom cap. You don't say anything. Neither does he. He just tears the page out, rolls it up, and adds it to a folder labeled fruits, unknown, exotic. It becomes clear to you now, nobody really knows what a banana looks like. Not really. But they all want to draw it anyway. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In the 1600s, the concept of accurate botanical illustration was still developing. The famous Hortus Botanicus of Leyden, one of the oldest botanical gardens in the world, was founded in 1590 and quickly became a hub for scholars trying to document foreign plants. But access to live specimens was rare, and even trained botanists sometimes relied on word-of-mouth descriptions or faded sketches sent from colonial outposts. And here's your quirky tidbit. There's evidence that at least one early Dutch artist painted a banana upside down. Not by accident, on purpose. He believed the banana's curve made more sense that way, like a horn or a scythe. When questioned, he reportedly replied, "How else would it stay on the tree?" Historians still argue whether that response was sarcastic or genuinely confused. You turn a corner into a workshop filled with oil fumes and paint-stained rags. Here, a trio of painters are huddled around a canvas in progress. The scene is lavish, an opulent table set with game birds, silverware, a velvet tablecloth, and, of course, a banana. Or something banana-ish. One of the artists pokes it with the end of a brush. "Too fat," he mutters. Another disagrees. "I saw one with this exact thickness." "You saw one in a dream," the third scoffs. But he paints it anyway. This is where it gets strange. The banana is becoming a kind of visual telephone game. Each version builds on the last. You recognize the same curve in 5 different studios, replicated over and over again like a religious icon. You even see a little flourish, a painted nick in the peel, reappear in multiple paintings. It's not based on reality. It's based on trend. You visit a woodcut artist who's carving a book illustration meant for a travel compendium. "Banana," he says simply, holding up the block. It looks like a dead fish wearing a party hat. But he's proud of it. "They say it tastes like honey bread," he adds, though he doesn't sound convinced. When you ask where he got the reference, he pulls out a sheaf of drawings. Some are obviously bananas. Others, they look like bent cucumbers, sad sausages, or, worryingly, elongated pine cones. He shrugs. One's got to choose, eh? You begin to see a pattern. Bananas in art are not just interpretations, they're inventions. In an era without photographs or Google image search, a fruit scene once might become 50 different objects in the hands of 50 different painters. That's the magic of this moment. The banana, still a stranger to Dutch mouths, is becoming deeply familiar to Dutch eyes. You pass by an open-air stall selling curiosities, crystals, feathers, small carved figurines, and spot a peculiar item, a tiny wax model of a banana in a wooden case. From Batavia, the vendor lies. Guaranteed lifelike. You hold it up. It's weirdly stiff. A little too yellow. But you realize this is how artists study the fruit between shipments. They don't need the real thing, they need a reference. Something to hold, to light, to shadow. Something they can use to paint what they think bananas should be. And so, the illusion grows. One final stop before sundown, a tavern, where a local painter is loudly complaining over beer. "They've started calling them sailor's fruit," he grumbles. "Disrespectful. I spent 2 hours arranging that thing in a goblet." His friend shrugs. "Shouldn't have painted it next to a wine bottle." The room bursts into laughter. But you can't stop thinking about it. The banana is no longer just a fruit, it's a canvas for projection. A source of rumor, comedy, confusion. It's never been more than an occasional visitor, but it's everywhere. In sketches, on walls, in gossip, and no one's tasted it. Yet. You wake to the sound of someone shouting across the canal, something about a commission for a banana. Your ears perk up. It's not every day that tropical fruit causes a commotion before breakfast. You follow the noise, rounding the corner into a narrow street where a well-dressed merchant is arguing with a painter's apprentice. The merchant is agitated, waving a folded letter and insisting on realistic curves. The apprentice, covered in charcoal dust and clearly underpaid, keeps muttering, "We've only seen one, and that was green." It turns out the merchant wants a grand still life table, lace, imported sugar, and most importantly, a banana center stage. Not just any banana. A believable one. "None of that over-polished rubbish," he says. "Make it honest. Natural. Subtle. Easier said than done." The painter, a man with a balding head and a reputation for doing whatever pays the most, agrees to the job. He's seen a banana once. From across a room. For about 4 seconds. But he's a professional. He'll figure it out. Later that afternoon, you stand with him in his studio as he sketches. The banana will go beside a heap of raisins, 2 candlesticks, and a dead pheasant with feathers still iridescent. Classic Dutch flex. But the banana? That's the wild card. The painter does what any respectable 17th century artist would do in his position. He guesses. He starts drawing. First, a gentle curve. Then a couple of spots. Then a soft ridge down the side for texture. It's not perfect, but it feels right. He adds a little tear in the peel. A suggestion that the banana's just starting to open. "Very sensual," he mutters, then immediately blushes and scratches it out. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dutch still life wasn't just about realism, it was about coded meaning. Everything on the canvas stood in for something else. A skull meant death. A snuffed candle, impermanence. A peeled lemon might hint at hidden truths beneath the surface. Bananas, new to the scene, didn't come with established symbolism, so painters and viewers invented it as they went. And your quirky tidbit: one recorded inventory from a 17th century estate listed a painting described only as with curved yellow fruit, uncertain kind. The cataloguer had no idea what it was. Banana? Plantain? Crooked squash? No one could say. But it was valuable enough to be logged alongside gold-framed portraits and Spanish silk. Back in the studio, the merchant arrives to view the finished work. The banana, freshly invented in oil and shadow, glows on the canvas. Its curve is just the right blend of mystery and confidence. The background is dark, letting it stand out like a spotlighted dancer on a stage. You can feel the pride humming off the merchant as he nods, slowly, approvingly. But then, a pause. He leans closer. Shouldn't it be fatter? The painter swallows. It varies by region. The merchant nods, pretending he understands. He doesn't. Neither does the painter. But the painting sells. You leave with the merchant, who carries the still life carefully under his arm, wrapped in a thick wool cloth. He's headed to a gathering, an upper-crust dinner party full of lace cuffs, pipe smoke, and gossip so dry it could start a fire. Inside, the painting becomes the centerpiece. No one comments on the pheasant or the lace. All eyes go to the banana. From the Indies, one guest asks. Yes, the merchant lies. What's it taste like? Asks another. Like honeyed bread with a touch of almond, he replies, making it up on the spot. Someone leans closer. Why is it split? To suggest temptation, says a woman, not missing a beat. You watch as interpretations pile up like jam on bread. One guest says the banana represents colonial abundance. Another claims it's a symbol of man's fall from grace. A third mutters something about fertility and then gets very quiet. This is the heart of the banana's rise. It isn't just painted, it's read. Interpreted. Decoded. The fact that no one actually knows what it is makes it even better. It's a mirror. A symbol Rorschached in yellow. Historians still argue whether this kind of overinterpretation was encouraged by the artists themselves, or simply a side effect of wealthy people trying to sound smarter than they are. Some letters between painters suggest a bit of both. One wrote, "They do the talking for us. We simply give them the fruit." As the evening fades and wine flows, one brave guest asks the question no one else dares. Has anyone here tasted one? Silence. A few polite coughs. Then someone points at the painting. That one looks too ripe. You catch a suppressed snort from the corner. Someone else says, I heard they're dangerous unless boiled. Another nods solemnly and adds, my cousin ate one and had visions. And suddenly, no one wants to taste it. It's better this way. Mysterious. Elegant. Exotic. The banana, untouched and misunderstood, becomes more powerful the less it's known. You leave the dinner party and drift once more into the quiet night. Lamps shimmer on the canal. The painter's window glows behind drawn curtains. He's already starting the next canvas. 3 bananas this time. 1 peeled. Scandalous. You find yourself drifting into another studio, this one higher end. The smell of linseed oil is thicker here, richer somehow, like the painter mixes it with ambition. His windows are taller, his brush is finer, and the bowl of fruit on the table is not for snacking. It's curated, arranged, controlled. He's staring at another artist's work. Not just any artist, his rival. The man across the canal who, rumor has it, painted the first banana in Amsterdam. Not the best banana, mind you, but the first. And in this world, first is everything. You ease in closer and glance over his shoulder. The rival's banana looks good. Suspiciously good. It has a sheen like sunlit lacquer, shadows in all the right places, and most damning, a small, curling split at the end of the peel that suggests someone might have taken a bite. The painter frowns. Too confident, he mutters. He's bluffing. He calls his apprentice. Fetch me fruit. All the strange ones. Especially if they curve. A few hours later, the table is covered with possibilities. Overripe pears, twisted squash, a parsnip he bends gently to mimic the banana's arc. But none of it feels right. None of it has the mystique. So he does what any insecure genius would do, he copies. Not directly, of course. That would be uncivilized. He interprets. A mirror curve. A slightly different color. A more mysterious background. He paints with controlled fury, layers of glaze and shadow and delicate gold speckling, as if the banana is some sacred relic recovered from a forgotten jungle temple. You watch as the banana comes alive under his brush. It looks familiar but distant. Like déjà vu on a tablecloth. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dutch painters of this era often formed bitter rivalries. The market was crowded, competitive, and deeply dependent on reputation. Being known as the man who painted the most accurate melon could make or break a career. So when a new subject appeared, especially one as strange and photogenic as a banana, artists scrambled to claim visual territory. And here's your fringe tidbit. One anonymous letter from a studio assistant describes a painter keeping a wax banana under lock and key, hidden in a drawer with gold thread and a rosary, calling it his secret model. He only took it out in private, late at night. His wife wasn't allowed to see it. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, artistic secrecy, or something a little weirder. Art historians love a good mystery. Meanwhile, our painter finishes his banana piece and stands back. He nods once. It's good. Not better than his rivals, but close. Close enough to confuse people. And confusion, in art, is power. He arranges a viewing. The city's patrons arrive in furs and lace, some with dogs tucked under their arms. They sip wine, peer at the canvas, and begin to whisper. Such bold shadowing. Where did he see one so ripe? I heard he keeps a tropical garden in his cellar. The rival shows up halfway through. Arms crossed. Smile tight. He walks slowly up to the painting, eyes flicking between the banana and the artist. Well done, he says with enough acid to strip paint. The painter nods graciously, like a man who definitely didn't trace someone else's banana from memory at 3 a.m. Later that night, you watch the rival paint again, this time adding not just one banana, but 5 stacked, intertwined, dramatically posed. It's a flex. A banana power move. You realize what's happening. Banana envy. It spreads quickly. One artist paints a single banana in the corner of a breakfast scene. Another responds by painting a dozen, piled high like golden tusks. A third, clearly overcompensating, includes a banana being eaten by a monkey beside a naked cherub holding a goblet of wine. You're not sure what it means, but it sells. And here's where the fun kicks in. Painters start exaggerating. The curve becomes more dramatic. The color deepens into gold. Some bananas acquire little dots, tiny freckles meant to suggest ripeness. Others are green, hard-looking, severe, meant to say, I know what stage of ripeness is authentic. But most of them, they're just made up, embellished, stylized. And the collectors love it. You're in a small drawing room now, standing behind a wealthy woman sipping rose water from a silver spoon. She's admiring a new acquisition, a banana painted with such elegance it might as well be a saint. She doesn't know it's fake. She doesn't care. It has such balance, she says. A certain divinity. You're about to snort, But then you notice the signature. It's the rival again. He's getting better. But the painter from earlier, he's not done yet. You watch him start again, new canvas, new banana. This one's softer. The peel slightly open. A little bruising for realism. He's upping the game. You think, they're not painting fruit anymore. They're painting each other. A duel in fruit form. Back in the studio, the artist's apprentice finally breaks. Master, I've never actually seen a banana. What does it taste like? The painter pauses, brush midair. Like quiet luxury, he says. Like tropical silk. The apprentice squints. Is that real? No, the painter says. But it's convincing. And that's the point. You step into the heart of the city, where canvas and fruit collide in a full-blown frenzy. The market is more crowded now, more colors, more languages, more stuff. And not just from the East Indies. From Africa, from the Americas, from places you've never heard of unless you're rich enough to fund an expedition. Every corner overflows with the unfamiliar. Papayas the size of babies. Pineapples with crowns so dramatic they'd make royalty jealous. Tamarinds in sticky brown clusters. There's even a tub of what looks suspiciously like pickled lizards, but nobody wants to ask. You're walking among bakers and beggars, smugglers and sailors, and every single person is obsessed with exotic fruit. Not to eat, don't be ridiculous, but to display. To paint. To own, briefly, before it rots and disappears into the past. You pass a fruit stall where a boy arranges his wares with surgical precision. Figs, grapes, a single peach, and at the very center, a banana. Green. Hard. Imported just yesterday and already browning at the tips. A painter walks by, eyes it greedily, and pays more than he should. You follow him as he cradles the fruit like a relic and hurries home, past half-frozen canals and frozen-looking pedestrians, straight to his studio where he places the banana beside a newly acquired pineapple. And oh, the pineapple. It's the Beyoncé of fruit. Spiky, dramatic, and almost cartoonishly improbable. The painter doesn't care that both fruits are unripe. Or that he's never tasted either. He begins sketching with reverence, muttering, the new Eden. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The 17th century saw a craze for still life paintings loaded with exotic objects. These paintings weren't just decorative, they were declarations. Statements about wealth, education, and access. If you had a pineapple on your table, painted or real, it meant you had connections to the outer world. You mattered. And your quirky tidbit, the Dutch word for pineapple was ananas, borrowed directly from the 2P word nanas. But for a while, some people referred to both pineapples and bananas as ananasen, because no one really knew the difference. That's right, your banana might have been mislabeled as a pineapple. And no one questioned it. Historians still argue whether this confusion was linguistic laziness or just another example of colonial arrogance, lumping all unfamiliar fruits into one juicy, foreign-sounding category. But here, in the studio, things are precise. The painter is obsessed with textures. The pineapple's ridges must be perfect. The banana's curve must tease. He places a cracked goblet beside them, then a watch, a favorite motif. Time, decay, vanity. The fruit won't last. Neither will you. That's the message. Except, the banana kind of steals the show. The pineapple is dramatic, yes, but the banana is personal. It's soft where the pineapple is hard. Curved where the pineapple is spiked. Suggestive in a way that makes viewers lean closer, tilt their heads, whisper questions. You walk across town to another studio where a young woman is painting by candlelight. She's bold, talented, and utterly uninterested in painting tulips. Her canvas is small but fierce. It shows a banana being peeled by a monkey with a pearl collar. It's surreal. Unapologetically weird. But brilliant. You can tell she's not following the still life rules. She's poking at them with a stick. The banana here isn't exotic, it's mischievous. Maybe even a little rude. The monkey's expression suggests he knows something you don't. The artist giggles softly as she paints. They'll say it's immoral, she says. They always do. Her friend leans in and mutters, "It's just a banana." She replies, "Exactly." The painting makes its way into a gallery weeks later. It's controversial, but it sells. Suddenly, everyone wants a different kind of banana painting. Something witty, scandalous, fresh. The trend fractures. You have the classical banana school, serious, shadowy, symbol-laden compositions. Then there's the fruiter's fantasy crowd, bananas alongside birds, serpents, and objects that never share a table in real life. And finally, the comic school, bananas next to faces, bananas as noses, bananas being juggled by cherubs. You name it. You sit in a crowded cafe where two painters argue over a sketch. "Banana in profile, too flat," says one. "Banana with bite, too lewd," says the other. You sip your imaginary 17th century espresso and smile. This is peak banana discourse. And outside, the fruit keeps arriving. Slowly. Sporadically. Enough to keep the fantasy alive, but never enough to kill the mystery. The port unloads another shipment. A single crate. Inside, 4 bananas. One smashed. One split. One completely blackened. One, perfect. The dockmaster lifts it like treasure. A bidding war breaks out before it even touches the cart. You follow the banana to its next home, a university collection. That's right. It's going into a cabinet of curiosity, right between a mummified bird and a preserved lizard fetus. Because sometimes a fruit isn't just a fruit. It's a museum piece. The scholars take turns sketching it, measuring it, writing little notes in Latin. One writes, "Curved yellow herb. Peel resistant to ink. Interior soft. Flavor unknown. Possibly sacred." You sigh. Still no one has eaten one. Not properly. Not with intention. And maybe that's the magic. Because once you know, once you taste it, it stops being mystical. It becomes just food. You can't hang mystery in a gallery, but you can hang longing. And so, the banana boom continues. Not because it's understood, but because it isn't. You wake to a rain-soaked morning, cobblestones slick and reflecting the warm candlelight leaking from the taverns and workshops. Rain in Amsterdam isn't an event, it's a mood. And this morning, that mood is oddly reverent. You step into a bookbinder's shop, drawn in by the smell of leather, ink, and damp parchment. On the table near the window lies a new arrival, a folio of botanical illustrations, freshly printed, delicate as pressed flowers. You flip through the pages. There's a plum rendered in obsessive detail, a sliced fig, a grapevine with leaves curling at the edges, and then, there it is. A banana. You stop. It's labeled Musa sapientum, a name that means fruit of the wise. It looks almost correct. The ridges are there, the curve is generous, and the peel is mid-flutter like it's caught in a breeze. But it still feels just a little wrong. Like a memory of a banana. A dream version. The printer probably copied it from a painting. And the painter from someone else. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The naming and cataloguing of bananas began formally during this century, often by men who had never actually seen or tasted the fruit in person. Carl Linnaeus, who would later refine banana taxonomy in the 18th century, relied on secondhand reports, sketches, and traveler accounts. But even earlier, Dutch scholars had already begun labeling, organizing, claiming the banana intellectually. And here's your quirky tidbit. One preserved herbarium sample from the mid-1600s in Leiden features what is labeled as a banana peel fragment, but analysis suggests it might actually be the brittle husk of a squash stem. The label is still intact. The misidentification is eternal. Historians still argue whether these errors were innocent or quietly intentional, a way to fill in gaps when curiosity outpaced accuracy. Back outside, you drift into a university lecture hall, ducking through the side door just as a tall professor begins pointing at a large charcoal drawing on the wall. It's a banana, labeled in Latin, studied like a relic. He describes its anatomy, length comparable to a handspan, texture slightly yielding to pressure, internal substance pale and, reportedly, sweet. He gestures dramatically. Here, the ridges. Here, the vein. You lean over to a student who's furiously taking notes. Have you ever seen one? You whisper. She shakes her head. Only in woodcuts. But I hear they smell divine. The professor continues. Bananas may grow on trees, or not. Some sources claim they grow on herbs of exceptional size. Some say they flower once and die. Others say they return. We cannot yet say for certain. There's a long pause. Then, softly, they may not be real. The class murmurs. You can see it in their faces, they're not sure if he's joking. Later, in the corridor, you find a glass case displaying a banana carving in ivory. The tag reads, "Gift from Java." Possibly ceremonial. It's smaller than life-size and slightly too pointy, like the artist had only seen a brief sketch. But it's sacred now, locked behind glass, protected from decay. You step back out into the city, where a traveling street performer is balancing fruit on his head for a crowd of children. Figs, apples, one brave lemon, and yes, a painted wooden banana. He juggles them, lets the banana tumble dramatically to the cobblestones, and gasps. "Careful," he says, "this one's from paradise." The crowd laughs. But there's something else there, fascination. The banana has become more than comedy. It's symbolic now. A punchline with depth. A fruit with philosophy. You head to a wealthy home in the Jordan district. Inside, two scholars, beards, spectacles, ink-stained cuffs, are arguing softly over a newly arrived manuscript from the East Indies. It's filled with odd sketches of plants. One depicts a tall, central stalk bearing curved fruits in layers, like scales on a fish. The caption is rough Portuguese, but it includes the word banana. Could this be accurate? One asks. The other shrugs. It's a traveler's sketch. They exaggerate. Still, they place it gently into a folio, alongside serious pages on cassava, tamarind, and clove. The banana joins the empire of knowledge, half believed but fully archived. You pass a shelf and see a small carved idol of a local saint holding a tray of offerings. Grapes, pomegranate, and yes, a banana. It doesn't belong there. It's too recent. Too foreign. But someone's placed it anyway. Because the banana, more than any other fruit of the moment, is starting to mean something else. You wander now into a print shop, where an etching hangs in the window. A tropical scene, a man with a feathered headdress, a thatched hut, a monkey holding a banana. You squint. The banana is massive, bigger than the monkey. The artist was clearly guessing. A man beside you chuckles. Everything's bigger in the colonies. You smirk. Especially their imagination. And here's where the tension starts to twist. Because bananas aren't just fruit anymore. They're stand-ins. For the unknown. For the colonized. For the other. They are symbols wrapped in peel, shaped by the painter's hand, misunderstood on purpose. A harmless mystery to hang on the wall, without needing to understand the people who actually grow and eat them. Back in a workshop, a woman painter sharpens her quill and mutters to her sister, they want a banana for their library wall. to remind them they own something they've never touched. The sister snorts. Or to forget they stole it. And so the banana becomes more than trendy, it becomes colonial shorthand. If you can paint it, own it, mislabel it, display it, then you've made it part of your world. Even if it was never yours to begin with. Evening falls with a quiet hum, and you drift into a manor house on the edge of the city, one of those sprawling, many-windowed places where the floors creak in aristocratic disapproval. The walls are thick with paintings. Not just a few tasteful portraits, but entire galleries of objects, flowers, birds, skulls, snails, shells, and fruit. Fruit everywhere. But tonight, you're here for one fruit in particular. The owner, a gaunt man in velvet slippers, gestures proudly to the centerpiece of his newest salon, a still life the size of a doorway. You step forward. You see pewter plates, sugared lemons, a goblet full of wine, and at the very center, golden, radiant, basking in candlelight, a banana. Not just painted. Enthroned. The guests lean in, voices hushed. One murmurs, so delicate. Another, that curve is divine. The owner overhears and beams. Painted by a man who spent a week with the East India Company in Batavia. A week. He says this like the painter wrestled a crocodile with his bare hands. The guests nod solemnly, as if a mere week among the savages, as they so ignorantly whisper, has granted him mystical banana knowledge. You're not so sure. The banana in the painting is gorgeous, yes, but suspiciously perfect. Unblemished, unnaturally symmetrical, glowing faintly like it's lit from within. It's a fantasy. A fruit-shaped fiction. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Dutch artists were masters at idealization. Their paintings often corrected nature, smoothing bruises, enhancing curves, making the world just a little more perfect than it really was. The banana, already half imagined, became the perfect subject for this. It didn't just represent tropical bounty, it represented perfected foreignness. And here's your quirky tidbit. One artist became so obsessed with painting the perfect banana that he reportedly created over 20 practice studies on tiny ivory tiles, miniature banana portraits. None survive. But one contemporary claimed the painter dreamed in yellow curves and once tried to polish a real banana peel with egg whites to match the gloss in his painting. Historians still argue whether this story is literal or the product of too much absinthe at a guild dinner. Back in the salon, the painting becomes the center of attention. But beneath the praise, something curious is happening. The guests don't just admire the banana, they begin to treat it like a character. A presence. As if it's somehow aware of its own importance. One guest speculates, it looks like it's listening. Another says, it reminds me of a woman I once loved. Everyone ignores that. Someone else says, it's the future. This fruit, it's where the world is going. That part might be true. Because the banana is becoming more than an exotic curio. It's becoming aspirational. A symbol of the wider world, of modernity, of empire dressed up in sugar and peel. And painters know it. You slip back through the streets and into a workshop where a new trend is blossoming. Call it banana maximalism. Paintings where the banana isn't just present, it dominates. A whole composition built around its curve. One artist paints a peeled banana laid over a skull. Another paints a banana unpeeling itself. A third surrounds a single banana with a full wreath of tropical leaves, creating a sort of fruity halo. It's not subtle, but it sells. You hear an artist muttering to his apprentice, bananas are gold. Not just color, value. He's not wrong. Here's the secret behind the paint. Exoticism is currency. The more foreign something appears, the more desirable it becomes. Even if the artist doesn't understand it. Especially if they don't understand it. It means they can invent. You step into a dim study where a patron is negotiating with a painter. He wants a custom piece. His wife, in a silk robe, reclining beside an open window, holding, what else? A banana. Not too ripe, he warns. Suggestive, but tasteful. The painter raises an eyebrow. She's holding it. How? Like she's never seen one before, the patron says, eyes gleaming. The painter nods slowly. Of course. You leave before it gets any weirder. Meanwhile, the banana's reputation is starting to split. Pun intended. Some still see it as exotic elegance. Others view it as dangerously sensual. A few theologians whisper that the banana, like the apple, might one day be blamed for someone's downfall. The debate heats up. You wander into a lecture hall where a young preacher is speaking. His sermon, "The Fruits of Vanity." His tone, dramatic. He waves a painting over his head, a still life featuring a half-peeled banana. He calls it immodest. He says, "We invite temptation into our homes, framed in gilded wood." The congregation gasps. You notice that no one leaves, though. They're too curious. Maybe even a little thrilled. The preacher is preaching, yes, but he's also describing. In detail. Every curve. Every shimmer of paint. And you see a glint in the eye of a woman in the third row. She's already imagining where she'd hang a similar painting. Perhaps above the fireplace. By the end of the week, she commissions one. With 2 bananas. Just to be safe. And so, the banana finds itself in a strange new place, caught between elegance and excess. A fruit both admired and feared. A symbol both sacred and absurd. And painters. They're loving it. You return to a studio where a group of artists are gathered, drinking and laughing as they take turns sketching their own interpretations. One draws a banana like a dagger. Another, like a quill. A third draws a banana shaped like a crescent moon. They're all wrong. But also, somehow, completely right. Because by now, it doesn't matter what a real banana looks like. What matters is what it means. You slip into a warehouse loft near the docks, where the scent of drying varnish mingles with the distant brine of saltwater and wet wood. Inside, a circle of painters is clustered around a table, arguing in the hushed, intense way only artists can. On the table lies an object under a cloth, long, curved, clearly fruit-shaped. One of them lifts the fabric like a magician revealing a trick. It's a banana. A real one. Sort of. It's bruised, half mummified, probably smuggled from a passing ship 3 weeks ago. It looks exhausted. But it exists. And that's enough to ignite creative chaos. "I knew it," shouts one painter, jabbing a finger at the dark ridges. "I told you it had ribs." "No," another counters, "that's just rot." A third pulls out a sketchbook. "It's thinner than we thought. Maybe this one's malnourished." "No," says a voice from the corner. "We've been wrong the whole time." And that's the moment it hits you, something's shifting. The banana, for decades now, has lived in a half-truth world of invented elegance, romantic shadows, and wild metaphor. But now someone has a real one. And it's disappointing. The artists argue over what to do. Do they update their paintings to match this shriveled reality? Do they keep painting the fantasy? A painter with streaks of blue oil across his cheek finally says what everyone's thinking: no one wants to see this. So they don't. Instead, they sketch the real banana, but then tweak it. Make it thicker, smoother, add a little glisten, a slight blush of gold. The banana becomes ideal again. Not based on truth, but inspired by it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In Dutch Golden Age art, truth was often flexible. Painters routinely adjusted proportions, lighting, and texture to enhance symbolic impact. Beauty didn't have to be real, it just had to feel true. That's how you get lemons shinier than glass, lobsters redder than rubies, and bananas that don't actually exist. And your quirky tidbit: in one painter's journal, he records testing different oils to restore the sheen of a weary fruit. One recipe includes a mixture of linseed oil, egg yolk, and a tiny shaving of actual gold leaf. Did it work? No. Did he try it on a banana? Absolutely. Historians still argue whether this was desperation, innovation, or just sheer boredom. But here's what matters: artists are now pretending they've always known. You overhear one say, "I painted one like this years ago. Very ahead of my time." Another claims his grandfather planted the first banana tree in Harlem. Never mind that the climate would kill it in a week. The myth-making is growing faster than the fruit ever could. You drift through a printmaker's shop where engravings of bananas are selling by the dozen. There's a new trend: banana diagrams, banana cross-sections, even pseudoscientific plates labeling parts of the peel like organs in a medical book. A small child stares at one and asks, "Mama, is that what the inside looks like?" Mima hesitates. "Yes," she says. "Probably." Even the scientists are catching banana fever. You step into the home of a naturalist who has just received a dried specimen, courtesy of a VOC contact in Sri Lanka. It's small, shrunken, brittle. He handles it with silver tweezers and reverence. He writes, "The flesh, though absent, must have resembled the apple, though softer and pale as ivory. One might suppose its taste mild, with floral humors." You blink. He's describing the ghost of a fruit, but with confidence. And that's the key. The banana's power isn't in what it is, it's in what it allows people to say about themselves. You sit in on a meeting of the Guild of Decorative Painters. There's now an entire subcommittee dedicated to tropical accuracy. They meet weekly. Their current debate: should bananas be painted with the ends upward or downward? One member insists, upward suggests vitality. Another argues, downward is more naturalistic. A third says, "I heard they hang straight down in Sumatra." No one here has been to Sumatra. Eventually, someone says what everyone's thinking: just paint it both ways. Buyers don't know the difference. And that, dear listener, is the secret behind many a banana's appearance in 17th century Dutch art. Back in the salons, banana paintings are changing. They've stopped being about the fruit and started being about status. One gentleman commissions a portrait of himself holding a banana like a scepter. Another has it embedded in his family crest. To suggest global reach, he says. And softness. One woman, wealthy, unmarried, extremely stylish, poses with a peeled banana beside a bowl of oysters and a broken pearl necklace. The symbolism writes itself. You visit a painting studio run by three sisters. They're young, brilliant, and tired of being asked to paint lace and dead birds. One of them is sketching a banana that looks like it's about to wink. "You know," she says, "it doesn't matter what they look like anymore. It's all metaphor now." You ask, metaphor for what? She grins. Depends on who's buying. Because in this golden age of paint and posturing, the banana has transcended fruithood. It's a tool, a riddle, a visual flex. No longer painted from life, but from culture. No longer rare, but rarefied. And still, most people haven't actually tasted one. Even as the paintings multiply on walls, in print shops, across dinner tables, only a tiny handful of Dutch citizens have bitten into the real thing. And maybe, just maybe, they prefer it that way. You slip into a quieter part of town now, where the canal houses are narrower and the windows wear lace curtains like whispered secrets. Inside one of them, a middle-aged couple is setting up a dinner party. Candles flicker. Silver gleams. And at the center of the polished walnut table is a still life painting propped on a velvet easel. You recognize the fruit instantly. The banana. It sits there, in the painting, impossibly elegant. nestled beside a pomegranate cracked open just enough to suggest sin, and a silver spoon reflecting the distorted world around it. The banana doesn't look real, it looks theological. Like it's seen things. One guest stops and stares. It's just so evocative. Another, swirling his wine, adds, "It reminds me of our voyage to Lisbon." They've never been to Lisbon. A third murmurs, "It has such depth." They're not talking about potassium. You realize, the banana, by now, is a conversation starter. Not about itself, but about you. Your worldliness. Your taste. Your ability to talk at length about something you know nothing about. That, more than paint or spice, is what the Dutch are importing, a sense of identity. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the mid to late 1600s, still life paintings had become as much about status signaling as they were about artistry. Owning a canvas filled with exotic fruit was a shorthand for colonial reach, trading ties, and upward mobility. Bananas didn't just represent the tropics, they represented access. And here's your quirky tidbit. In one record from a wealthy merchant's home, a servant was fined for touching a banana painting with sticky fingers. The document doesn't clarify whether the fingers were sticky with food, paint, or curiosity, but either way, the offense was taken seriously. Banana art had become sacred territory. Historians still argue whether the fascination came from genuine interest in the fruit or if it was simply a fashionable vessel for projecting power in a rapidly globalizing world. Meanwhile, the banana continues to shapeshift. You visit a young painter working out of a cramped attic. He's experimenting, layering banana forms over cityscapes, over maps, even over portraits. He calls them banana overlays. They're weird. Beautiful. A little unhinged. One canvas shows a banana eclipsing the moon. Another has a banana arching over a crucifix like divine punctuation. And a third, your favorite, depicts a man proposing marriage, down on one knee, offering not a ring, but a peeled banana. The painter shrugs. It's a metaphor. You nod. Of course it is. Elsewhere, banana motifs are showing up in unexpected places. Embroidered onto collars. Painted onto ceiling tiles. Scratched into ivory combs. One goldsmith even designs a cane handle shaped like a banana peel curling back from a gemstone core. A walking fruit of temptation, he calls it. You follow the trend to a print shop tucked behind a cheese market. Inside, a wall of etchings shows biblical scenes, but bananas keep sneaking in. In one, Eve offers a banana to Adam. In another, Noah's Ark unloads crates labeled Musa. Subtle? Not even slightly. But the people love it. The printmaker grins. They sell best when they confuse priests. You chuckle. Then you step into a cathedral, where, somehow, the banana has arrived. In the stained glass. You spot it tucked into a corner of a window depicting God's bounty. Among the wheat and grapes, there it is. A glowing, yellow banana, haloed in red. You whisper, "Really?" The monk beside you shrugs. Symbol of providence. Or temptation. Or both. You leave, unsure whether to laugh or applaud. Then, back on the street, you hear a familiar voice. It's the fruit seller's boy from before. He's older now, his cart fancier. And there, under a wax cloth, lies a single, imported banana. Bruised. Pricey. Real. You ask, how much? He replies without blinking, 40 guilders. You choke. That's absurd. He shrugs. You're not buying the fruit. You're buying the story. And he's right. Because at this point, the banana isn't about nutrition. Or taste. Or even colonial conquest. It's about aesthetic resonance. About how something curved and golden and half-imagined can worm its way into culture, into minds, into art, and refuse to leave. You duck into a theater now, where a play is underway. A tragedy, vaguely classical, with togas and torches and very little actual Greekness. At center stage, during a dramatic death monologue, an actor pulls out a banana and lays it gently on his lover's chest. The crowd gasps. Is it symbolic? Is it absurd? Is it both? Yes. The banana has reached peak performance. And back in the real world, the painters are still experimenting. You enter a studio where a new apprentice is carving a banana out of wax for his master to use in still life compositions. It's beautiful. Delicate. Almost glowing. He frowns. But I've never seen a real one. You nod. Does it matter? He thinks for a moment. No, he decides. This is more real than the real one. And that, really, is the core of this whole era. The real banana is too rare, too foreign, too perishable to hold on to. But the idea of the banana, that lives forever. On walls. In minds. In layered oil and metaphor and cheeky fruit jokes buried under candlelight. You step out once more into the cold night. The canals are quiet. The city is breathing, dreamlike. And somewhere, in a painting no one will look at for 300 years, a banana curves gently under a dying light, waiting to be noticed. You follow the curling cobblestone paths through fog, past oil-lamped windows and shuttered doorways, until you reach a private collector's hall, a high-ceilinged chamber packed with curiosities. It smells of beeswax, dust, and the slow exhale of old secrets. Shelves grown with taxidermy, coral, Turkish slippers, and a taxidermied crocodile that looks vaguely embarrassed. But at the heart of the room, under glass, on a marble pedestal, sits a small oil painting. You already know what you'll see before you step closer. A banana. This one's a bit different though. It's peeled halfway, the skin curling down like a shrug. Behind it stands a column, cracked with age. The fruit casts a dramatic shadow across a skull and a broken lute. Ah! A Veneta's painting. You remember those reminders that all things must die. That beauty fades, and fruit rots, and yes, even the lute will one day fall silent. The banana here is no longer exotic or romantic. It's a stand-in for mortality, for the soft, tender flesh of existence, always bruising under time's heavy thumb. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Veneta's paintings were a major genre in Dutch art, rich with symbols, watches, extinguished candles, decaying fruit to remind the viewer of life's impermanence. In a world where plagues came in waves and fortunes disappeared overnight, these paintings were like tasteful existential crises in a frame. And your quirky tidbit. One lesser-known Veneta's artist reportedly used real banana peels in his underpainting, pressing them into wet gesso to leave behind ghostly impressions. Conservators would later find faint traces of potassium embedded in the wood paneling, like fruit-shaped fossils. Historians still argue whether this was a spiritual gesture or just a really weird mixed-media experiment. Back in the collector's hall, a woman leans close to the glass and whispers, "It looks like it's sighing." Her companion frowns. "It's a banana." "No," she says. "It's tired." And maybe it is. Because this fruit, this idea wrapped in yellow skin, has carried a lot. Discovery, fantasy, competition, seduction, and now, decay. It's become a memento mori, a peeled metaphor, gently browning in the dim light. But don't worry. The banana's not going anywhere. Outside, in a candlelit gallery across town, a new school of painters is emerging, less reverent, more experimental. One artist creates a series, 12 small canvases, each with a banana in various stages of ripeness. From firm and green to blackened and collapsing into itself. She calls it the calendar of desire. Another paints a banana as a comet streaking across a dark sky. He titles it the tropical apocalypse. You peer at it. The brushstrokes are wild. The banana arcs like a sickle. It's absurd. It's beautiful. It's somehow perfect. Meanwhile, the philosophers have entered the game. You wander into a gentleman's study where two men sit by a fireplace, sipping fortified wine and talking fruit with terrifying seriousness. "I propose," says the first, "that the banana represents the ideal form." The second snorts. "It spoils in days." "Exactly," the first replies. "Perfection must vanish, or else it ceases to be perfect." They pause, dramatically. You back away before they quote Plato. Elsewhere, in a library warmed by whale oil lamps, a student pores over trade logs from the Indies, trying to calculate how many bananas ever made it to Dutch shores. The answer? Probably fewer than most people imagined. But that doesn't matter. The banana didn't need to be present. It just needed to be imagined. And so it thrived. In that imagination, bananas get bigger, glossier, more perfect. Painters stop depicting the fruit with shadows and start glowing it with halos. One shows a banana floating above a dinner table, like a ghost of luxury. Another paints one being cradled by cherubs, the fruit of heaven. It's ridiculous. You love it. Then, at the city's edge, you visit an artist no one talks about anymore. His studio is small, cold, sparse. But on the wall hangs a painting that stops you. It's just a banana. Not peeled. Not glowing. No silverware, no skulls, no allegory. Just a single banana on a cracked wooden table. It looks real. A little bruised. A little ordinary. A fruit at rest. The artist sees you looking and smiles gently. "Everyone wanted to turn it into something it wasn't," he says. You nod. "And you?" "I just wanted to see it." He walks to the table, picks up a second banana, real this time, and peels it. You hold your breath. He takes a bite. "Chews slowly." "It's fine," he says. And somehow, that feels profound. Because after centuries of mystique, layers of metaphor, heated guild debates, and wildly inaccurate drawings, someone finally just ate it. And it was fine. The spell is broken, but in the best way. You walk home beneath low clouds and dripping gutters, wondering how many centuries it took to admit that not everything rare is divine. Some things, bananas included, are just fruit. But in the right light, with the right story, they can become anything. The wind has turned again, briny and brisk as it rolls off the canals. You wrap your cloak tighter, boots echoing through narrow alleyways where paint-stained hands open shutters and dump the morning's turpentine into the street. A rooster crows somewhere, probably from a rooftop. Today, something's changed. You feel it in the air, the way you sometimes sense when a fashion fades, or a taste begins to sour. The banana boom isn't dying, but it's maturing. Becoming quieter. Less novelty, more nuance. Fewer golden halos, more complex shadows. The fruit's finally being treated like an object that exists, not just a metaphor in a velvet frame. You step into a publishing house where woodcut prints are flying off the press. At one table, an engraver with half-moon glasses carves the image of a banana bunch hanging from a thick stalk. It's not glamorous. It's botanical. Accurate. There's dirt. Wilted leaves. Even a worm. He holds it up to inspect it. Not beautiful, he mutters. But real. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Toward the end of the 17th century, scientific documentation began overtaking artistic license. Books on natural history, botany, and medicinal plants favored detailed, faithful illustrations, plants drawn from life, dissected, labeled, cross-referenced with local knowledge from the colonies. And your quirky tidbit. One such botanical guide described the banana not just as edible, but as a soothing agent for melancholia when boiled with milk and taken at dusk. No mention of how it tasted. Just that it was good for sadness. Take that, chamomile. Historians still argue whether this shift toward realism came from Enlightenment ideals or simply because the exotic had finally become a little less exotic. You wander into a merchant's house, modest but tasteful, where a painting hangs not above the mantel but tucked quietly in a hallway. It shows a cluster of bananas, slightly green, hanging from a wooden beam beside a hanging scale and a journal left open on a table. There's no gold frame. No dramatic lighting. Just a quiet stillness. Trade paused mid-moment. You can tell the artist has seen bananas now. Not just one, but bunches. You imagine them arriving in bundles wrapped in palm leaves, bruised and fragrant, no longer wrapped in myth. You drift past workshops where artists now keep sketchbooks filled with banana studies. Some paint them half-rotten. Others slice them open to examine the fiber structure. One adds a fly landing on the peel and sighs in satisfaction. Imperfection, he says. At last. And yet, not everyone is ready to let go of the fantasy. You visit a gallery where a wealthy patron stands proudly before a 10-foot canvas showing a banquet in heaven. Saints recline on silk cushions. Doves fly overhead. And at the center, a celestial banana, aglow with divine light, flanked by fig leaves and almond blossoms. You raise an eyebrow. The patron notices. A tribute to paradise, he says, puffing up slightly. It's very yellow, you reply. It cost a fortune. Of course it did. Because even as some move toward realism, others are doubling down on the myth. Not just because it's beautiful, but because it sells. The banana, like all things, lives between two truths, the one you see, and the one you want to see. You visit a group of apprentices in a canal-side workshop. They're experimenting with new techniques, soft brush tips, pigment layering, even light shadow embossing to make the banana feel like it's pushing out of the canvas. They don't ask whether the banana is real. They ask, how does it feel? One explains, it's not about the fruit. It's about the moment before you peel it. Another adds, it's the possibility that sells. You nod. The banana has become a moment, not a meal. In a nearby print shop, a series of satirical etchings shows up. One features a man trying to balance on a banana peel like a tightrope. Another depicts a ship filled not with spices or gold, but bananas, each stamped with tiny faces of parliament members. The people laugh. You realize, the banana has entered comedy. Not as a cheap punchline, but as cultural shorthand. Everyone knows what it means, what it used to mean, and how far it's traveled. From sacred mystery to status object to melancholy botanical drawing to public joke. That's range. You attend a dinner party with intellectuals, philosophers, poets, two confused apothecaries. At some point, someone begins reading a sonnet that compares a fleeting love to a ripening banana. Rhymed in Dutch. Translated poorly. You chuckle quietly. Another guest offers a toast to the yellow fruit. Long misunderstood. Often overpainted. Never quite tasted. They raise their glasses. Even the wine smells vaguely tropical tonight. The banana, once a whisper from distant shores, is now part of the Dutch psyche. Not commonplace, but known. Its power no longer comes from mystery, but from memory. You pass by a baker's window the next morning. In the display, a banana tart. It looks sweet, tender, familiar. A tiny placard beside it reads, inspired by the paintings. And there it is. The loop has closed. Art once imitated life. Then life imitated art. Now, finally, life and art are holding hands, eating dessert. You take a bite. It's fine. Sweet. Soft. A little overrated. But it's real. Dawn spills across the rooftops like poured milk, soft and quiet, bathing the city in gold. You're walking the market stalls just as they're setting up, before the shouting starts, before the scent of onions and pickled herring fills the air. There, among the crates of apples and bundles of leeks, you spot something almost invisible now in its normalcy. Bananas. A few bunches. Smaller than you expected. Green-tinged. Not radiant or gilded, just fruit. No onlookers gasp. No crowd gathers. One merchant sighs and wipes the condensation from his brow. Late shipment. They're softer than they should be. You ask how many he'll sell. Not many, he shrugs. Most people just look. The age of mystery has ended. The banana is no longer rare. It's just one more option. And yet, it lingers. You wander into a painter's attic, where the artist, older now, with hands that tremble slightly, paints not for show, not for sale, but for memory. His canvas is cluttered, a loaf of rye, a cracked cup, and a banana, sliced open but untouched. He doesn't idealize it. He doesn't mock it. He simply observes. You ask why. Because, he says, it was once a miracle. And I want to remember it like that. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the turn of the 18th century, bananas had begun to lose their status as exotic rarities in Dutch painting. They still appeared, yes, but less often as sacred symbols and more often as quiet participants in scenes of daily life. Just another fruit, no longer needing a spotlight. Your quirky tidbit. One still-life painter from the period began inserting a half-eaten banana into every one of his compositions, as a personal joke. Art historians call it the yellow thread. In one painting, it's tucked behind a wheel of cheese. In another, it floats in a goblet of wine. It's always there, never explained. A quiet smirk across centuries. Historians still argue whether he was critiquing colonial consumerism or just really liked bananas. But you know better. You've seen the arc. From whispered wonder to holy symbol to satire to memory. You step into a schoolroom now, where a young girl sketches a banana in charcoal. She's never seen one outside of art. She doesn't even know what it tastes like. Her teacher leans over. Make it longer. Rounder. Remember, it should look important. And the legacy continues. Because the banana may have arrived at reality, but its myth never truly left. You pass a dockside cafe where a group of sailors sit eating breakfast. One of them pulls a banana from his satchel, peels it with a grunt, and bites down. Another says, "Funny how we used to trade pearls for those. Funny how people used to paint them." Someone else adds. They laugh. Not cruelly. Just with the casual amnesia of those who live past a thing's climax. And then, one of them says quietly, "Still good, though." That's enough. You wander through a final gallery, less grand, more worn. Dust swirls in the light shafts. Paintings hang crookedly. One depicts a half-rotten banana beside a crushed goblet. Another shows a banana sliced on a pewter plate, the peel curled like script. And in the corner, nearly hidden, is a tiny portrait. A child holding a banana with both hands, eyes wide, unsure whether to eat it or pray to it. You stand there for a long time. Because that's it, isn't it? The banana, in all its absurdity, always offered two directions, reverence or ridicule. And somehow, it still manages to be both. You make one last stop before the day fully wakes. A warehouse, converted into an artist's co-op. Inside, young painters are working on large canvases, loud, expressive, chaotic. They're mixing realism with surrealism, light with void. And in the center of one canvas, emerging from an ocean of blue, a single banana, enormous and glowing, rising like a new sun. You raise an eyebrow. The artist grins. We're bringing it back. Of course you are. Because in the end, symbols never really disappear. They just hibernate. Wait. Peel slowly. You leave the studio and walk toward the sea. The air is brackish. A gull cries overhead. Somewhere, in the cargo hold of a ship bound for Amsterdam, a crate of bananas rests in the dark, bruised, fragrant, waiting to be unpacked, maybe painted, maybe eaten, maybe ignored. You smile. Because you know what they used to mean, and what they still might. A hush has fallen over the city. You feel it in the air, a thick stillness like the moment just before the final candle gutters out. The night is long, the moon sharp, and the streets whisper under your feet as you make your final walk through this strange, banana-shaped portal of Dutch history. You pass shuttered windows glowing faintly from within, small flames behind old glass, illuminating quiet rooms filled with paintings. So many paintings. Piled in attics. Hung in drawing rooms. Forgotten in basements. And in so many of them, still, like a yellow echo, the banana. Not always obvious. Not always central. But there. Lingering. You find yourself in the study of an archivist, ink-stained and soft-spoken, surrounded by dusty scrolls and fraying canvas. She's sorting a stack of forgotten works from provincial estates. They thought it was just a pair, she tells you, holding up a faded painting. But look at the shape. The texture. You nod. Banana. She grins. Always the banana. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the end of the 17th century, Dutch art was shifting away from symbolic still life toward portraiture, landscape, and civic pride. The age of allegorical fruit was quietly closing. But traces of it remained, baked into the composition rules, the lighting, even the subconscious habits of generations of artists who had once painted bananas like they were prayers. And here's your quirky tidbit. A 1698 inventory from a merchant's home in Delft includes a curious entry, painting, golden crescent fruit, with face. No one's sure what that means. Some say it's a banana shaped like a crescent moon. Others claim the face was literal, perhaps carved into the fruit, or imagined within the paint. Historians still argue whether the face was meant to represent the devil, God, or the artist himself peeking from the peel. You leave the archivist behind and climb one final narrow staircase, spiraling up to a garret studio with slanted ceilings and cracked beams. There's dust here, and silence. And in the middle of the floor, covered in a threadbare cloth, is one last canvas. You pull it back slowly. The painting is simple. A banana sits on a chipped plate beside an empty glass. The room behind it is dim. The window shows only grey sky. And there's something about the way it's painted, soft, unpretentious, even a little melancholic, that feels like a farewell. The banana isn't glowing. It isn't heroic. It isn't exotic. It's just tired. But there's beauty in that. A closing of the curtain. A slow breath out. You sit there for a long while, letting the stillness wrap around you, the way linen wraps a fruit before transport. Gently. Lovingly. With care. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a fruit. It was about what a fruit could mean to people who would never grow it. Who rarely touched it. Who built myths and metaphors out of it. Who used it to explore identity, power, distance, temptation, and time. You stand, finally, and walk once more through the canals, now mirrors in the moonlight. A dog barks in the distance. A door creaks shut. And somewhere, in a gallery you'll never see, someone is painting a banana again. Not for gold. Not for status. Just for fun. And so, let's settle in, now, for the final descent. The night grows softer now, like fabric pulled across a well-worn chair. The street's empty. The voices fade. Even the breeze along the canals seems to quiet, content just to curl around corners and slip between shutters. The world slows. Your breathing deepens. And somewhere, back in that distant golden age, the last painter dips his brush one final time. The canvas before him is nothing special, just a table, a cloth, a few pieces of fruit. But he pauses over the banana, lets the yellow glow stretch longer than it should, adds a curve that bends just so, a shadow that lingers like a secret. And with that stroke, he adds something not from life, but from memory, from wonder. The fruit, so long misunderstood, now rests easy. No longer a mystery, no longer a symbol. Just a shape in a quiet painting, a half-smile on a wooden panel. You tuck that image away as your thoughts begin to drift. Let the colors fade now: ochre, sienna, gold. Let the echoes of brushes, arguments, candlelight, and curious glances dissolve into silence. Because there's nothing left to chase. The banana's journey is complete. And yours is, too, for now. So lie back. Let the hush settle in your bones. Let the dark hold you, soft and warm. And if you dream of yellow curves and candlelit rooms, of ships creaking under fruit and artists painting metaphors by moonlight, that's just your mind tracing the peel of history one more time. Good night, traveler. Sweet dreams.